Thank you, Mr Assistant Speaker. I move the motion standing in my name on the notice paper relating to recent changes to action bus routes.
The question is the motion be agreed to. Ms Lee.
Thank you, Mr Assistant Speaker. Public transport is a key component of local government. It is in many ways the lifeblood which keeps the organs of a city functioning. And as a city grows and matures, a good transport network will also need to grow and mature to meet the needs of its people. My newest colleague, fellow member for Kurrajong and Shadow Minister for Transport, Ms Birch, will go into a bit more detail on our city's needs for transport generally, while some of my other colleagues will address shortcomings in their own electorates. What I want to focus on, however, in this motion are the 2017 timetable changes to the Action Bus Network and the impacts these changes have made and are making to my constituents in Kurrajong. These changes have highlighted this government's attitude that it knows better than the people of Canberra that use public transport every day. This government has made a key failing in changing bus routes with no or poor consultation with the Canberrans that use the services, and by doing so has left Canberrans stranded, isolated and baffled at how and why these changes were brought about. In the inner south, two popular bus routes, the number 4 and the number 5, have been compiled into one monstrous Frankenstein route. Under several different route names, the number 5 route has serviced the residents of inner south for decades. In particular, the residents of what is affectionately known as Old Narrabundah have relied on this bus to take them to the city, Russell, Canberra Hospital or the Woden Town Centre. Similarly, the number 4 route, which connected residents of Red Hill, Narrabundah and Griffith with Woden and the city, was a popular route that many residents of inner south had come to rely on. In October last year, all of that changed. The number 5 route was cancelled altogether, and the number 4 route was changed in a poor attempt to fill the void left by the cancellation of the number 5. Two bus routes hastily stitched together to create a monster route by the poor judgment and short-term thinking of its creator. Mr Assistant Speaker, let's call this the Franken route. The Franken route has a number of issues. First, it is poorly synchronised with the number 6 route and leaves patrons waiting for nearly 30 minutes for a connection. It no longer takes residents of Narrabundah to where they want and need to go. It travels a long, convoluted route which cuts out many stops. As an example, Danny of Narrabundah observed to me that for her journey home from Woden, she would have to get on the number 6 bus at Woden Town Centre, travel for 14 minutes, a total of 11 stops, get off at Goyder Street near Narrabundah College, either walk home from this stop, a journey of 1.3 kilometres, or have to wait 29 minutes for the next number 4 bus, travel on that bus for 4 minutes, another 5 stops to get home. A total of 47 minutes, a journey which previously took 10 to 20 minutes. This prolonged wait for a connection at Goyder Street is because the timetable has been so poorly coordinated that the number 6 is repeatedly missing the number 4 by 1 or 2 minutes, leaving patrons stranded for half an hour. Now, Mr Assistant Speaker, public transport should be accessible to all. However, the Canberrans that rely on buses the most are our young Canberrans who do not have a car, our mobility impaired Canberrans who can only rely on carers or friends to drive them so much and so are in need of bus options, our elderly Canberrans who either no longer drive or do not feel confident driving on a daily basis. And I note that in the amendment circulated by the Minister, she has at least acknowledged these vulnerable Canberrans, although I suspect that may be actually an effect of Ms Lukuta. On a cold Canberra winter, is this government really asking these Canberrans to wait at a bus stop for half an hour for a connection? Second, the Franken route has lengthened the journey time from Old Narrabundah to the city by almost double. Frank of Narrabundah says that his commute to work has gone from a 15 to 20 minutes on the bus number 5 to a 35 to 40 minute journey and involves either swapping buses or a very, very long walk. And like many torch-wielding villagers have done so, Frank has run away from and abandoned the Franken route and now drives. Susan of Narrabundah is forced to pay expensive parking fees because the alternative of spending an hour each morning and an hour each evening that it takes for her to get into town and home is just not worth it. Now, Mr Assistant Speaker, the Minister may claim that, and as she has done before, that consultations were done. that these changes are only for the better, that she's only received glowing positive feedback about the new services. We all know that is just not true. Between the hours of 8:15am and 5:45pm, every second number 6 bus which arrives at the Goyder Street stop leaves passengers with an almost 30-minute wait between buses. How can the Minister look Old Narrabundah residents in the eye and claim with any credibility that the new bus network offers more services and connectivity for them? Third, the decline in the number of stops serviced in the inner south is astonishing. There are so many stops, some of them our beautiful, iconic Canberra bus shelters, which are now schools-only stops. Since 2014, 28 bus stops, 14 pairs, in Red Hill and Narrabundah have had their regular services removed. This results in longer distances for patrons to walk to the nearest bus stop and more money spent by the government building new bus stops. Why does this government insist on change for change's sake, even at the expense of cutting off essential services for Canberrans who need them most? Fourth, let's talk about the Franken route. Rather than providing a vital link for inner south residents to get to the Woden Town Centre or the Canberra Hospital, the altered number 4 route terminates at the Fyshwick Outlet Centre. It seems to this government ensuring that people get to the outlet centre for shopping is more important than a vital link to the Canberra Hospital. Prior to the election, the proposed green rapid route was just a vague green line on a blurry map of Canberra and failed to let voters know that the services would be at the expense of a vital route through Old Narrabundah. How duplicitous and expedient is that? Fifth, the lack of proper consultation and the dismal failure of the Minister to communicate with bus users is just not good enough. In my capacity as their local member, my office did a letterbox drop to the residents of Old Narrabundah to inform them about the introduction of the number 6 bus and the alteration to the number 4 route. What followed, Madam Deputy Speaker, was a flood of correspondence from my constituents. By far the most contact I've had to my office since I was elected. Not only were the residents concerned, bewildered and outraged by the disadvantages of the changes, but the information my office letterboxed was the first notice they had received of the route changes. Not only would this government rob the people of Old Narrabundah of their bus route, but it would do so with little to no information, let alone consultation as to how this change would affect them. In September, in response to a question, I asked the Minister about what consultation she and or her directorate had conducted prior to the decision to cancel the number 5 route. She said, and I quote, "Information is being made available to residents now." Now, Madam Deputy Speaker, that's September, after the decision was already made. Now, she said back in September, Madam Deputy Speaker, after my office had had a flood of complaints from concerned residents. This government's communication leaves a great deal to be desired. And any suggestion that the announcement of the new number 6 route in the lead up to the 2016 election as consultation ignores the fact that there was no indication that other routes would be altered or cancelled as a sacrifice to implement the new number 6 route. The Minister claims that there are now more buses in Narrabundah than there were prior to October 2017, and this is true only in technicality, and ignores the fact that Old Narrabundah, a section of the suburb where we know there is a good proportion of our elderly and mobility impaired Canberrans, now must make do with a less frequent, convoluted route which terminates not at the Canberra Hospital or the Woden Town Centre, but in Fyshwick. The Minister is either not being briefed on the seriousness of the issues impacting inner south residents, or she is choosing to ignore them, or she doesn't care. I don't care what she believes. My concern is for the residents of inner south, and she has a duty to them. A duty, Madam Deputy Speaker, that she is clearly failing. It is not just the residents of inner south that are feeling the brunt of these changes, however. I have had a number of residents from the inner north express concern about the lack of certainty and communication about changes in bus routes. They are in the dark about what will happen to their existing bus routes when the tram is up and running. Given the sudden changes to bus routes in the inner south with no communication and no consultation, there is angst among inner north residents that their bus services are next on the chopping block. And this, Madam Deputy Speaker, does not even begin to touch on the areas across the territory that don't even have a proper public bus service like Oaks Estate. And this is why, Madam Deputy Speaker, I bring this motion today and I call upon this government to do three fairly simple things. First and foremost, apologise to the Canberra residents who have been and continuing to be severely impacted for their lack of communication about the bus route changes, something this minister has admitted in this very chamber. To review the changes and to report on these changes. And I note that in her response, which was tabled yesterday, in response to the petition I brought to the Assembly last year about better connectivity in the inner south, she said that a review is happening, so I cannot understand how she would be opposed to this. And third, subject to the review, undertake and give assurances to those affected Canberrans that their bus services will be restored. And Madam Speaker, Deputy Speaker, this is what a local government that is elected to serve its citizens should be doing, no less. Madam Deputy Speaker, I commend my motion to the Assembly.
Close?
Yes.
Okay. The question is that the amendment be agreed to. Ms Lee to close.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I thank all my colleagues for their support on this motion. I'm actually still at a loss as to how Ms Lakuta is actually not supporting my motion, given that her speech was actually full of Ms Lee this, and I agree with Ms Lee on that. So it baffles me that I'm not receiving her support on this motion. I know that Ms Lakuta is an advocate for public transport. I know that she is aware of the issues that are facing inner south residents, and only yesterday Ms Lakuta notified the Public Transport Association of Canberra that this motion was actually coming because presumably she thought it was a worthwhile motion to be debated in the Assembly. So thank you for the sympathy, Ms Lakuta, but I would much rather have your vote, just to put that on the record. Extremely disappointing, Madam Deputy Speaker, to hear that the Minister once again is not taking this issue seriously. I listened very, very carefully to the Minister's speech, and what I heard, Madam Deputy Speaker, was very little on the key issues that I brought in my motion. What I heard is the same old, aren't we great, we got elected and we're going to do this and that, and aren't we great because we are going to deliver this and that. Very little on the particular issues that I raised in my motion, and I do wonder whether she was listening to my speech at all. When she was addressing the motion and boasting of the patronage numbers having gone up, first, she completely ignores the key fact that the Chief Minister is at great pains to speak, which is, of course, that Canberra has grown in population and it has increased its tourist numbers. Second, the patronage may have gone up on the particular number 4 and the number 6 bus, but I do wonder whether those numbers are double counted, given that a lot of the people who required only to travel on one bus are now required to travel on both to get to where they are because of the poor connectivity. Further, Madam Deputy Speaker, what assurance is this? Can the Minister really look at Danny, at Susan, at Frank of Narrabundah in the eye and say, you know what, the patronage on those buses has gone up? What reassurance is that for those people who are still missing a bus service? Further, the Minister can quote whatever figures she likes, but it's the people that catch the bus, and it's her job as the Minister for Transport to provide effective public transport for all Canberrans. The fact that she has absolutely ignored the hundreds of people who have contacted my office, I'm sure Ms Birch's office, and I'm sure the late Mr Dospot's office, even Ms Lakuta has confirmed that she's been contacted by a number of people, just demonstrates that, yet again, this government is using the fluffy words of access for all and social justice and equality, but when faced with the cold, hard reality of the people who are directly impacted, that numbers are above the people. She wants to talk about figures so much, she fails to completely mention the $130 million loss that Action makes each year. Why? Because public transport is an essential service that serves people. In terms of the consultation, the lack of consultation, the Minister went to great lengths to say that she undertook these consultations. Is she saying that the residents of the inner south refused to engage in the consultation process, or somehow that they missed this consultation process? Or is she saying that the entire cancellation of the number 5 bus is, quote, a minor change to the route that doesn't require a formal consultation process? It's one or the other. Off-peak travel for seniors is all very well, but if the bus doesn't take you where you need to go, or departs from a bus stop that you can't reasonably walk to, the concessional price is meaningless. A flexible bus service that is free for all is very well, but if you need to attend a medical appointment urgently, then it's of no use, given that you need to book 48 hours in advance. If you need to get to a shopping centre to buy groceries and the closest bus stop is nearly a kilometre away, whatever the frequency, whatever the timetable, whatever the concessional fare or even free, it becomes pointless. To claim that for the minister to claim that she has consulted with the community when all that happened at best was information sharing after the changes were made is just not good enough. Madam Deputy Speaker, what does the minister say to the residents of Old Narrabundah who are being kicked off the bus? Preaching to them that overall figures of patronage have gone up is of little comfort to them when they still don't have an effective bus service. The minister seems to have thrown to the wind her predecessor's grand vision for the future of transport in Canberra, and that is when Minister Corbell claimed that it would be a transport system that puts people first. And if the minister is not willing to listen to the members of the opposition who are voicing the concerns of their constituents, then perhaps she was moved by a member of her own party, Ms Chain, earlier this morning, talked about that 1 kilometre is carrying groceries from the Belconnen Fresh Food Markets to the Belconnen bus stop is quite a long way. Or does the minister think that perhaps 1 kilometre in Belconnen is too far, but 1.4 or 1.6 in Old Narrabundah is quite okay? And if she's so focused on the figures and not the people, then I will enlighten her with what the people have to say in their own words. Quote, the government encourages people to use buses instead of their own cars for those who have one, and then makes ridiculous decisions which make it more difficult for people to get from A to B. Canberra already has terrible transport system, so why make it worse? There does not appear to be any consultation between the minister and the Narrabundah community, and quite frankly, I am furious about it. My land rates have gone up extensively over the past couple of years, and I know this is partly to fund the light rail, which only benefits the residents of Gungahlin in its first stage. Then to have our bus discontinued is unbelievable. Another quote, it's like they've gone back to the 1956 route, which is fine when Canberra was 60 years ago. When 60 years ago there wasn't much past Griffith's shops. But Canberra isn't what it was like back then, and buses need to keep up. Another, and this is actually a direct response to the minister when she was spruiking the new routes. You are indeed correct in saying that these changes are disruptive, asserting that disruption is justified for, quote, an overall improvement for passengers across the bus network, end quote. However, you didn't explain how this will occur, which passengers and what parts of the network. Aren't all passengers equal, or are some more equal than others? Another. I found the response from the minister to be disingenuous. It is clear she is cognizant of the lack of community consultation and quite ignorant of future need. More services? How do you expect a 103-year-old to walk 1.5 kilometres from Carrinkle Court to the rapid green stop at Griffith in order to get to Woden? My blind neighbour walks 50 metres to the bus stop for a trip to Woden. How is he supposed to get to the Green Rapid? The extra service is meaningless if not accessible. The community is rallying, and I can assure you social equity issues are at stake here. Do you really want this matter to become a political thorn in your side? We can put a face to the vulnerable and we can tell the human story. All Minister Fitzharris can do is cite anecdotal indicators. Old Narrabundah is not resistant to change. We want to be included in those changes. Where is the genuine engagement? So far, all that has been forthcoming is political duck speak and a lot of ducking and weaving. Madam Deputy Speaker, I could go on and on. However, for the interest of time, what I will say is this. I have read the Minister's amendment to my motion. The Canberra Liberals will not be supporting that amendment because, once again, it is another attempt at rewriting the entire motion, absolutely ignoring the key issues that I have brought to this Assembly because it is of great concern to the people in the inner south, and another self-congratulatory amendment that completely hijacks the issues. And it's disappointing, but not surprising, that the Greens are in the front row giving them a standing ovation for what they are doing, and on that basis, I commend my original motion and the Canberra Liberals will not be supporting the amendment.